In just 40 days, a nation of nearly 90 million people saw its economic future evaporate. Between February 28th and the fragile 2-week ceasefire signed in early April, the United States and Israel unleashed a surgical, devastating military campaign on Iran. It was called Operation Epic Fury. But the targets weren't just military bases or missile silos. The targets were the very arteries of the Iranian economy. Refineries, steel plants, banking data centers, shipping ports. In 5 weeks, an estimated 82,000 structures were obliterated. $1 trillion. That is a high-end estimate of what it will cost to rebuild what was lost in just over a month. To put that into perspective, before the first bomb dropped, Iran's entire gross domestic product was hovering around $400 billion. They lost more than double their entire economic output in 40 days. Right now, over 1 million Iranians have instantly lost their jobs. Business owners are selling their personal bicycles and cars just to pay rent. The internet blackouts have wiped out the entire e-commerce sector, and hundreds of global oil tankers are trapped, too terrified to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. This isn't just a military conflict anymore. It is an economic devastation that is actively spilling over into the global markets. But to understand how 40 days of war broke Iran, you have to understand the incredibly fragile house of cards that existed before the bombs even fell. If you want to grasp the scale of the devastation in April 2026, we need to rewind. Iran's economy was in shambles long before the war even started. For decades, the Islamic Republic has operated underneath some of the most crushing economic sanctions in modern history. Designed to choke off the nation's nuclear program, these sanctions effectively locked Iran out of the global banking system. They couldn't really sell their oil. They couldn't import essential machinery. By early 2026, the cracks in the system were undeniable. Inflation had skyrocketed to 50%. The currency was in a free fall. An energy crisis meant that cities were routinely hit with rolling blackouts. And rampant mismanagement and corruption at the highest levels meant that whatever resources the government did have were rarely reaching the people. Even Iran's president admitted it publicly right before the conflict escalated. His exact words to his people regarding their budget crisis: "We don't have money, we don't have it." The population was already at its breaking point. Millions of Iranians were living paycheck to paycheck, relying on a brittle infrastructure. They had adapted to surviving under sanctions, but you can't adapt to your workplace being erased from the map. When the conflict erupted on February 28th, the strategy was clear: degrade Iran's ability to fund a prolonged war. The bombardment systematically dismantled Iran's industrial centers. Take the petrochemical and steel industries, for example. These sectors employed over 200,000 people. Israel struck the massive petrochemical complex in Mashhar, a site the Israel Prime Minister explicitly called the money machine of Iranian government. But the ripple effect of destroying a steel plant or chemical factory goes far beyond those 200,000 workers. The agricultural sector relies on those chemicals. The textile industry relies on those materials. With those plants gone, manufacturers now have to import supplies at a massive premium, driving inflation even higher. The human toll here is staggering. Service job, day laborers, small software companies, they've all been stopped. People haven't been paid since February. We have reports of business owners sitting with their employees in empty offices, just crying. Furthermore, the strikes targeted banking data centers, taking down services at major banks like SEPA and Meli. Imagine waking up, your city's under fire, and your debit card doesn't work. Checks won't clear. You have to pay for everything in cash during hyperinflation. Conservative estimates place the immediate job loss at over 1 million, and with damages estimated between $300 billion to $1 trillion. The pathway for Iran's economic development isn't just paused, it has been entirely erased. But if you think this economic nightmare is contained within Iran's borders, you are deeply mistaken. Enter the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow stretch of water is arguably the most important geopolitical choke point on Earth. 1/5 of the world's oil and gas passes through here, and during the war, Iran effectively shut it down, laying mines and firing on vessels. Global oil prices immediately surged. In Europe, the energy crisis was so severe that Italy announced that they were delaying the shutdown of their coal-fired power plants by 13 years just to keep the lights on. The UN estimates that the neighboring Arab nations are facing the GDP loss of up to $200 billion because their main economic is utterly severed. Even with a 2-week ceasefire signed in early April, the ships aren't moving. Why? Because the insurance companies refuse to cover them. The situation is too volatile. Iran is demanding that ships use designated routes to pay millions of dollars in tolls just to pass safely. And this led to one of the most bizarre moments of the conflict. President Trump suggested that the US might actually form a joint venture with Iran to manage the strait and collect those tolls, proclaiming big money will be made. This sparked an outrage from their European allies in the UK, who are demanding the waters to be fully open for free international trade. With the economy completely paralyzed, Iran was forced to the negotiation table. Pakistan stepped in to broker the 14-day ceasefire, but these aren't your standard peace talks. This is a high-stakes game of geopolitical poker. Iran brought a 10-point plan to the talks in Islamabad. Is their economy is utterly devastated. The demands are maximalist. They want all U.S. combat forces out of the Middle East. They want total control over the Strait of Hormuz, and they want full compensation for the $1 trillion of damage, and most importantly, the lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions. Iran leadership knows they cannot rebuild without foreign money. The war has made sanctions relief a matter of existential survival, but Washington is not backing down easily. While Trump called the proposal a workaround basis, he has threatened to go right back to bombing if the talks stall, and there are massive sticking points like Iran's nuclear enrichment program, which Israel views as an absolute red line. And just to show you how fragile the ceasefire is, right now in the Middle East, these negotiations, a highly realistic AI deepfake video went viral, showing a top US general ordering a massive immediate strike on Iran. It took hours for the Pentagon to debunk it, but in that time, global markets panicked and the peace talks almost derailed entirely. We are now in an era where an algorithm could accidentally trigger World War III. So where does this leave us? We are inside a 14-day window. On one side, Iran is staring down the barrel of total economic collapse, $1 trillion in ashes, 1 million jobs gone, and an infrastructure that has been bombed back decades. On the other side, the US and Israel hold the military advantage, but the global economy is screaming for relief as the Strait of Hormuz remains paralyzed. If the peace talks in Islamabad succeed, we will see a historic lifting in sanctions and the slow, painful, decades-long rebuilding of a broken nation. If they fail, the 14-day pause would just be a deep breath before the final plunge. President Trump has threatened to wipe out their remaining infrastructure if a deal isn't reached. Iran has promised a crushing retaliation. The economy is broken. The ships are trapped. The clock is ticking.